Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year 2022. We welcome you all to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I am a cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one session and also group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550. And our website is lifecoachdanamzalag.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our season 3, episode number 8, a very special guest, Nischa Phair. Just like every of my past episodes, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Nischa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much for having me on your show. I am a researcher, author, practitioner of somatic therapy and movement-based somatics. I've been working in the field for almost 15 years now. I started to move into the space of sexuality, pleasure, and sexual well-being about 6 years ago, following an abusive relationship that called me to explore that part of myself and to do some deeper work in that area. So that's sort of the short version of why I'm here and what I hope we can talk about today.
Beautiful. Now, you mentioned abusive relationships. So we're talking about physically abusive, emotionally abusive, the combo of both. What exactly really prompts you to go into that field that you're in?
So today, the clients that I work with, they're primarily female or vulva havers who might be on the non-binary spectrum. And they, it ranges from everything from physical, emotional, psycho-emotional to what I call sexual abuse or sexuality abuse, which is the use of manipulative or coercive tactics to really eat away at a person's sense of self, sense of who they are as a sexual being, which happens quite often in abusive relationships, but it's not talked about because so many of the different factors that are involved in an abusive or manipulative relationship really end up damaging who we are as sexual beings on the whole.
Now, when it comes to the type of clients that you deal with, are they, what kind of person come to you and say, Nischa, I'm having a problem. What can you do to be able to help me? Or what are the steps that you take to be able to help that person? Now, obviously, when they first come to see you, they have difficulties to open up, to tell them exactly to tell you what the problem is. So how do you investigate?
So, well, first, I want to echo what you're saying about this area being really vulnerable for people. It's not something we talk about often. It's not something we're taught how to talk about as children. We repress everything about sexuality, at least. I think the kids who are coming up now as teenagers probably have a lot more exposure than some of us who might have been born in the 70s, 80s, or grew up in the 90s did. So there is a vulnerability hurdle that we get over, but most people find me because of my work around the phenomenon of fawning in relationships, which is the experience of people pleasing or going along with someone else's sexual desires or preferences in order to try and save the relationship, in order to avoid being harmed or being, emotionally abused. So that's often how people tend to find me. In terms of the steps we take, that's a personal, it's so individualized. Everybody is sort of at different stages in their process. So sometimes we work with movement, sometimes we work with sensory and sensuality to kind of help a person, my clients, find a place of safety in their bodies, because I think that's really the most universal negative side effect of any form of abusive relationship, is that we don't feel safe in our own bodies, in our own homes, our own physical somatic homes. So that's really my goal, first and foremost, is to support people to experience themselves, experience their bodies as a place of deep safety, and begin to rebuild that sense of self-trust
I
in
see.
themselves.
When it comes to someone's feeling insecure, okay, about the bodies, someone, let's say a woman who have or men have gained weight after a few years, is it something that you deal with that? Because you're talking about safety in their body. Does that also include insecurity?
I mean, insecurity is an effect of feeling unsafe in our bodies. It's also a cause, right? It's kind of one of those chicken and egg situations, but I really look at the forces that are acting on a person's sense of self that are preventing them from feeling that sense of groundedness. So sometimes that comes from, and coming back to, again, I really just work in the space of sexual well-being and pleasure and relationships. So, we can look at the effect of social media on people's sense of self and the tendency for us to perform our sexuality or our gender based on what we think, this influencer or that influencer thinks we're supposed to be or look like, what that, all the different celebrities are doing, and really trying to unpack whether the insecurity I'm feeling is coming from a place of conditioning, social conditioning, and these modelings of the ideal, woman, man, or body, instead of whether it's coming from something deeper and maybe historic, could be coming from a past relationship, from a developmental wounds. So there's a lot to unpack there. We don't think about sex as being as complex as it is, but really, I see sex and sexuality as being the connection to our aliveness, to who, and pleasure in and of itself is connected to our aliveness, to who we are as, soulful beings. And so when we start to unpack these pieces of who we are and why we came here, when we start to dig into the sexuality space, we're really looking at our psycho-emotional selves, who we were as kids, where our preferences are coming from, the past relationships with our parents, who our first kiss was. It's so richly complex. So there's, like with anything, with any process or any growth journey, there is no one size fits all. And the one thing I try to really drive home for folks is that if it feels right for you, then it is right. Period.
That is a very good point. Now, ideas, you talked about social media influencers and all that. And now when we look at what's going on with more and more people getting addicted to pornography, etc., we see now that men idealize women as having a size 2-inch waist, or having big breasts, or having tight. Now, the women that are in partner with those guys, is very hard to compete. Now, that may have a very deep impact in how they perceive themselves emotionally, physically, spiritually, and they lack that connection with their significant other, because that person is now looking at their wife as, why don't you look like the women that I see on the porn site? So how do you redirect positive energy into these ladies to make them see that they have to look at themselves as valuable versus to compare themselves with the women on TV?
I am so glad you brought this up. It's a real roadblock to healthy heterosexual relationships, pornography, not just because you have these ridiculous, ideals, not just for women, but for men too. You have these two ridiculous ideas of what male and female should be and look like, and men are looking to them for inspiration as much as for guidance as to what female sexuality should be. And so it really is doing a real number on all of us in relationships, forcing us to, telling many people that they need to be performing this idea of what sexuality is supposed to be, as opposed to connecting with what's authentic to them. So to your point, and let me backtrack just one little bit in saying that most of the women who come to me they find me after they've had an unhealthy relationship or unhealthy experience in sex or relationships and dating. So I don't work a lot with folks who are in the midst of a relationship that they're trying to heal, but I do, a lot of my clients do it, excuse me, do end up finding healthy relationships afterwards. And so I will coach them through that process. But to answer your question about how do we support women to really connect with what's true for them, a lot of women know, just to give you some research, they've done a lot of research to study not just adult women, middle-aged women, but young girls and young, teenage girls are fully aware of what men, their male counterparts, are watching. And they have this anxiety about what they're supposed to live up to. And they know it's not authentic to them. But there's this kind of conflict between, is this what I'm supposed to live up to in order to be accepted, in order to get love, versus what they know is true for them. So there isn't a huge leap that women have to make when they find me, because really what we're doing is just stripping back to finding that place of authenticity with themselves and their sexuality. By the time they get to me, they know that the relationship was unhealthy and they're aware of some of the manipulative expectations that a lot of their partners had. I've heard horrible stories of like one guy breaking up with his fiance because she didn't look exactly what you're saying, because she didn't look like the guy's pornographic fantasy, and it's really sad because, men are being put at a disadvantage here too. Yes. Obviously women are being harmed, but men aren't being encouraged to be their authentic selves sexually either. They're, getting trapped in this socially contrived idea of what sex and sexuality is supposed to be. And they're missing out just as much as women are being infringed upon by these ridiculous ideals.
But then again, as you said, people are becoming more and more shallow. They are, like you said, expecting their significant other to be able to abide by a certain standard. But then also, guys are being perceived as just objects as well. Like if this guy is not, doesn't have the body of Arnold Schwarzenegger at his hype, or doesn't have the right amount of muscle, the six packs, etc. So again, that's why we have eating disorders from the girls and from the guys as well. And, there's too much expectation happening in our society, Nischa, that is becoming extremely unhealthy. Now, also those expectations are unrealistic, okay? Because those people in porn, this is their job. This is what they do 7 days a week, and they work at it. But other people who have other real responsibilities, they are somewhat, how can I have the best of both worlds? And you can't. I mean, let's be real about that. You just can't. And because of that, we have guys that has sexual impotence. They cannot perform. And because of that, then the woman is feeling somewhat, not feeling less of herself, because, okay, now he's not attracted to me. So then it becomes a vicious cycle that never ends, because then the guy doesn't see the girl as being attractive enough. So he's not able to perform. And then it just becomes like a nonstop issue. So how do you break that mold, Nischa? How do you bring back that kind of self-esteem in the ladies, or even the men, for them to, those who are listening to the show? How do you break that? I mean, it seems like we are, and now with what's going on with the metaverse, okay, now we're going to be becoming like a world, we're going to have a virtual world, which means what happens then? There will be no more real human connection.
Yeah. I think that technology isn't going anywhere, but the thing that I think we always have to remember is that we're human first, and our consciousness is contained within the boundaries of our bodies. So it's one of the reasons that I lean heavily into my background in somatics. Now, I always encourage people, my clients, and whether male or female, to really ask themselves, what is this wiring me for? What is this pornography? What is this preference? What are these proclivities? What are my choices in bed? What are these partners that I keep choosing? What are all these choices wiring me for? Am I getting closer to being the person I want to be? Am I coming into greater integrity with myself sexually? Am I able to show up for myself and my partner in a better and more authentic way? And if the answer is yes, then great. Watch all the, crazy intense porn that you want, but I'm gonna guess that the answer is going to be no on some of those. So, I think the issue that you bring up about ED is a very serious one. And in the last 10 years, we've seen incredible rates of erectile dysfunction among young teenaged men. And these are young boys who, and I would say boys because they're not men yet, but it happens in men who are, in their 20s, 30s, 40s as well, who watch. So let me backtrack one sec. Our arousal systems are highly trainable. So based on what I'm watching, if I continue to watch the same type of content, I can wire my turn-ons, my physiological experiences of arousal to that particular content. I can wire it to a certain type of ethnicity. I can wire it to a certain location, to a certain type of sexual act. I can literally engineer the kind of sexual arousal experience I want to have based on my experience, by what I'm watching, by what I'm listening to, by the things I'm choosing to be turned on by. So we have this issue now of young men of all ages really, who can get an erection, get turned on and come and, be aroused to completion when they're using their favorite material. But as soon as there's a live human woman in the room, they aren't able to get an erection. And it's not their fault and it's not the woman's fault. It's because they're choosing to wire their arousal systems to this material. So this is where the question, what am I wiring myself for, comes into play, where it's like, I'm responsible for the fact that I don't have an erection if I'm watching this particular type of porn every day and my partner doesn't fit that model, right? So it's really about taking responsibility for our choices and inquiring into how we can come into better integrity, greater integrity with ourselves so that we can be better versions of ourselves and ultimately contribute of whatever it is we came to do here on this earth to the betterment of society, to our communities and families and the people we love.
Wow. Now, as we both know, Nischa, women are emotionally driven to be able to perform in bed because of how the men treat them, how the man cares for them, etc. The men are more inclined to be able to have a physical attraction, so more physically driven, and they could basically, if they find a woman attractive, even if the woman is nasty or really a biatch, if I could use this term, they don't care because they're more visual, and if the woman is like attractive, they'll go for it. Now, do you think that the women can actually start changing their way of perceiving sex, the way that they could, just because, as we know, sex is very healthy in a relationship. It reduces depression, it reduces anxiety, it reduces a lot of things that people are suffering from right now and that they have to take medication for. But a woman, you cannot change her DNA. They will always be emotionally driven to be able to perform in bed with the men that they are having not just a physical attraction with, but an emotional and spiritual attraction. Can we change that?
Well, I think I like to take, the biological determinism with a grain of salt, because while there are tendencies, yes, men tend to be more visual and women tend to be more emotional, there are always exceptions to the rule. And there are men who prefer to have sex with women that they're in love with and women that they have a strong emotional connection with. And there are women who don't care about emotional connection and just want to get busy. So, everyone's different and every circumstance is different. And the reasons that we might enter into a sexual encounter with someone are, varied. So I think that I always look at things in terms of nervous system, and the issue with, women need safety in order to orgasm. That's just pure and simple. And we've got research to prove this. Mountains of it. So it's really about how safe a woman feels with her partner, and less about whether there's this, strong emotional connection. Now, emotional connection does create safety, not just for the woman, but also for the man. Men like to feel like they can be emotionally safe with a woman, because it's harder for men to be emotionally vulnerable than it is for women to be emotionally vulnerable. So I really like to strip it back and talk more about, how is my nervous system being triggered by this person, or how is it being supported? Because a regulated nervous system is going to be able to produce greater pleasure. It's going to be able to experience more intense orgasms more effortlessly. So that's really where I try to encourage people to connect more with the idea of co-regulation in relationships. Mm-hmm. And if the co-regulation is there between two people, then the likelihood that either person is going to want to feel open and available to pleasure and connection, into like physical intimacy, is going to be heightened for sure.
Okay. Now, when it comes to couples who've been together for a while, and that sex has become a bit rusty, and not really much creativity in the bedroom. I know that there's like a lot of books about it, The Joy of Sex, which is, I think, one of the first book that came out, and then Tantric Sex, etc. Is there a way, or like someone that can do at home, that can like maybe listen to self-guided meditation to be able to start rewiring their brain and understanding the value of sex, and maybe like talk to their companion and tell them, hey, why don't we change things in the bedroom? I think communication is key, is number one, to be able to break that kind of like distress moment, so to speak. Is there any other thing that you suggest, Nischa, to be able to help couples who are actually going through those similar challenges?
Yeah. So in the case of heterosexual pairs, an issue that isn't often addressed is the fact that women tend to experience sexual boredom much more readily than men do. And the sexual boredom that women experience isn't like, I need to go and have sex in 17 different places and start, bringing in all of these different apparatuses. You don't need a sex swing. Invariably, and that's, again, everyone is different, but invariably the boredom is coming from a missed opportunity to connect with the deeper, more spiritual aspects of sex, and to really open up to our multidimensionality as sexual beings. So sex, I have one of the tools that I use, and I can share it in a link if you'd like for your listeners, is called the pleasure wheel. And the pleasure wheel has 12 different sections, and it explores the 12 different aspects of our sexual identity, sexual expression. So we can have sex for comfort, we can have sex for play, we can have sex for empowerment, for enlightenment and self-discovery. And really, I encourage, especially for couples who've been together for a long time, what can often happen is that we forget to look, right? We get so used to someone being in our world that we forget to look at all of the ways that they've grown over 5, 10, 20 years, all the ways that they've become more complex, the ways their multidimensionality has moved into different directions that may not be immediately obvious to us. So I really encourage folks to do that more, you can call it softer work, but it's the subtler work. Instead of trying to, go to a sex shop and just get everything that you can in the store, to look at those deeper, richer components that are contributing to the lack of connection. Because, I think vibrators and toys are wonderful, of course, but if we don't address the root, then all that other stuff is just a Band-Aid.
Yes. Now, you practice somatic. So if you could just tell us a little bit more about What does that mean specifically?
Mhm. So somatics is a field of research and study that is evolved in about the 60s. And there are a number of different arms, but they generally all concern themselves with it's sort of a philosophical, neurophysical, movement-based, and experiential practice and praxis. So it's both theoretical, but it moves into a practice-based modality. There are a number of different schools of somatics. There aren't as many departments at the academic level that are actually studying somatics specifically, but it tends to find itself under the umbrella of psychology and also dance, movement, and kinesiology. So it's really a study of the lived experience, the lived human experience. So part of my work in studying the lived human experience is to explore our relationship to pleasure and how that affects us as we go from being young children to being adults and aging humans.
Wow, and you cover everyone in the US or primarily in Canada where you're at?
I work with people all over the world, but just for time zone issues, yes, I tend to work mostly with people in North America.
Excellent. And now, if you go back to what prompted you to go into this field of study, you said that you were in an abusive relationship. And how long was the relationship for?
So I've been in somatics for about 15 years, but I shifted into the pleasure stream, or, focusing on pleasure and sexuality in 2014. The relationship itself was 5 years long.
5 years long. Okay. And do you feel by going into that field that kind of like awakened something in your mind to say, hey, I'm not in the right relationship. There's something wrong. There's something odd about it. What really kind of like brought this awakening moment?
Abusive relationships are funny. I don't think anyone ever thinks this is the right relationship for me. At no point, maybe in the first few months when it was the honeymoon period, and which is typical with like the love bombing, and then the nightmare starts to unfold. But other than those first 6 months, there was no time where I was like, this is the relationship that I've always dreamt of. It was a case of, my nervous system being triggered consistently, almost on the daily, and me eventually feeling like I would be worse off trying to leave than trying to stay. That there was more to be lost, more risk, more at stake if I tried to get out of the relationship than if I stayed. And it eventually got to the point where it was going to kill me if I didn't leave. And he wasn't that violent, but I could see it was beginning to get violent, very violent. And I could see that it wasn't going to abate. And that was when I finally got myself out.
Well, that I'm very, very happy that you did, because a lot of people don't have that courage. They do not have, especially if, they're too codependent of that person, then that basically does not allow them to be able to go on their own or know where to go from that point forward. So kudos to you, Nischa, for being able to have that courage and all. Now, for our listeners, how can anyone find you? I mean, is there a YouTube channel that people can find you, or any website or whatever?
Yeah, so my personal website, nischaphair.com. They can find me there. My first book is out now. It's called Fawn When No Looks Like Yes, and it's all about a lot of what we've been talking about in the context of sex, dating, and relationships. And that's available in e-format on my website, and it will be out on Amazon in February. So people can find my work there. And other than that, Instagram at Nischa Phair, and I'm sure I can give you all the links to that for the show notes.
Absolutely. And Phair is Phair, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy schedule to join us. Thank you again, Nisha, for participating and inspiring on many listeners with your incredible story and skill set. We hope that you have all enjoyed today's episode, and I'm very excited about the many upcoming guests that we have scheduled for the year 2022 of the Happiness Journey podcast, filled with inspirational stories just like the one that you listened today. Now, here are some concluding words of wisdom. When one door of happiness closes, another opens. But we often look so long at the closed door that we do not see the one which has opened for us. Because of being absorbed by the loss we experience, we feel there's nothing else left for us. Remember that some door closes on us for a reason, and that reason is paramount for your success. The other door opens are providing you with better opportunities than the former. It may appear to you that at any given moment that you do not deserve happiness or that all opportunities to being happy are lost. But the reality is that all is found and better options to becoming happy are right around the corner. That closed door can provide some sort of happiness, but there are so many out there that can provide more. Stay focused on the open ones. My name is Dr. Dan Amzalag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.